Ta-da! Alright, so we're starting this shit off with net neutrality. Now,
Mm-mm.
you really wanted to talk about this earlier when we were on the phone. And I'm kind of surprised that we're bringing it up now after, the great web apocalypse of 2018 did not happen. So,
Well,
what
there's a
brought this to mind for you?
because I was curious why you would still be worried about it when you don't know whether or not it's happened or not. So I looked into it, and it hasn't happened. Essentially, nothing is the ire and all the rage that everyone sort of got together hasn't occurred yet. Basically, they expended all their energy yelling and screaming for something that hasn't occurred yet. And now everyone thinks it's already done and gone with, but in actuality, it is just beginning.
So, okay, so here's the question, okay?
Hmm.
First off, are you for or against net neutrality?
I am against the FCC's net neutrality. There's a specific difference.
Okay, so you want FTC net neutrality. Can you
Yes.
explain the difference here?
So the FCC, so I guess at the core of it is a concept, it's a principle. Net neutrality is both a principle and an enforced practice.
Okay.
And the enforced practice only existed until 2000 or since 2015. So before that, the principle net neutrality had been everyone basically has equal access to the internet resource. It was treated sort of like a de facto utility, and it was sort of held together by various expectations and discouragement practices from the government, like but no sort of actual thing with teeth, no legislation in particular, and that's the way things were.
Why was net
Uh,
neutrality brought up in multiple court cases then?
well,
Before 2015?
that's because people were trying the lines of net neutrality. They were going against various companies and sort of uh, hindering the company to get more resources from the company. So, for example, a good example would be Comcast and Verizon, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And Netflix and Comcast, I think, is a really popular one.
Yeah.
It's a perfect example of what throttling would be.
Mm-hmm.
But it happened to Netflix. It didn't happen to people.
No, it happened to Netflix, yes. Netflix's
Yeah.
service was throttled back by AT&T
For more money.
for more money. Exactly. Well, they wanted more money from Netflix, which in
Hmm.
turn would raise Netflix's rates because, it's basically like the mafia saying, tax me or I'm not going to allow your business to do business on this street.
Hmm. And even though Netflix paid, do you remember a sizable increase?
It was like, what, $1? Something like that?
Yeah.
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 So, I mean,
So
okay. So, does this set a bad precedent for the future, though?
absolutely. Wait, what do you mean by that?
I mean, like, okay, so Netflix is paying them now, okay?
So we are now in 2014. Is that correct?
Well, Netflix is paying them now, too. They weren't paying them from 2015 to 2018 or
No,
17.
they still have to pay. They just don't have to pay a different rate than everyone else.
No, no one pays the cable company.
You don't
Customers pay the cable company, but not the websites themselves.
you don't
Websites
think
just pay
this
for their domain name and what websites they use and all that stuff. And their own servers and things like that.
so you're saying that the Netflix doesn't pays $0 to go through CenturyLink or
Zero, yes.
okay.
Did. Now they are paying again. During 2000, from like 2014 to 2015, I do know that Netflix was paying Comcast, and I think Comcast is the only one that they were paying.
Well, I do know that they pay drastically less than they did. I didn't know they didn't pay really anything.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought they paid just basically what everyone else would pay.
No, no one pays anything. You pay for a server farm, basically. And then the server farm hosts your website. So,
Okay.
from that point
So
on, Comcast or Mediacom or whatnot will all connect from, you will send you to that server farm. So the server farm is the only upstart cost of starting a web page. So, like, if I was to start a web page right now, I would just pay for my service to be on a server, pretty much. Heck, you could put it on your own computer and have it run off your own computer as a server. But you need a dynamic IP address for that. So, but technicalities aside and all that stuff, basically, what Netflix is paying for is to provide faster, or at the time in 2014, they were paying for consistent service. To where they wouldn't be throttled back during hours. Like if every other website was being throttled back in 2014 during primetime hours, then Netflix would not be throttled back because they were paying extra money for that. And it's kind of the reverse idea of net neutrality here, where we're saying we're just going to throttle everybody except for you if you pay us a premium here. So.
Yes, so that's the beginning of packaging, because they wanted a specific thing from Netflix. So well, they would have lawyers agree to whatever terms Comcast applied, and Netflix being a, what do you call that? It uses a lot of digital information, or it basically the streaming
a bandwidth hog. That's what you're trying to get at.
It's a thank you. It's a bandwidth hog. So it deserves to be costing more for that service. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. First off, our general idea with the internet, at least up until net neutrality came into the big framework in the late 2000s or so, was that internet should be completely free and open. Every website should get the same shake. If you're starting up a small business where you want to host videos, there should be no difference between you and, someone running, a wiki page,
That's the principle of net neutrality, yes.
Yes. Now, as websites got bigger and all that stuff, cable companies and, ISPs in general started saying, hey, if they're using up more bandwidth, why can't we charge them more money to use up more bandwidth? But that whole concept is completely null and void with the adding a fiber optic internet.
What you're saying it is easy to create bandwidth now.
Yes. It was not easy. It wasn't easy 20 years ago. Heck, it wasn't easy 15 years ago, or maybe even 10 years ago. But almost every major city has a fiber optic framework infrastructure right now.
So if I understand correctly, in the past when they didn't charge, it was harder.
It was harder, but the websites weren't as demanding back then. But nowadays it is a lot easier because fiber optic does not have the same limits that internet did before.
And websites are even more demanding.
Nowadays they are, yes.
Okay. And you think that it would be unfair for a cable company who paid for the optics to charge somebody to use it?
Well, this is an ideology that we have kept the whole time that we've had the internet.
Back when the internet was harder and less of it, less difficult.
Less difficult. It didn't have as much of a usage on bandwidth as they do nowadays. But again, the infrastructure has changed since then.
I agree. We're both in agreement that the infrastructure has changed. It's become bigger.
Yeah.
Right?
And that argument completely goes away with fiber optic. Fiber optic is insanely fast. There's no pipeline blockage nowadays, though.
There is no argument there is burden. I'm not saying there is burden.
There is no burden. None.
Again,
right now.
I repeat, I am saying
I know, I hear you.
0% burden. 0% burden.
Yes.
Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay. So, if an orange orchard has a surplus product and chooses not to sell 50%, is it the right of the government to come in and take it from him? Because it is no burden for him to sell it, but he just chooses not to.
Well, the difference between that and that is that internet is possibly a utility. It's become so intertwined in our life. That'd be like...
It has been determined to be a utility, and in that regard, food could also be considered a utility.
Well...
Because we have to live with food. We will die with it. We will not die without internet. But for some reason, the internet is a utility.
And also, the internet is also controlled... Well, fine, let's take this into a different segment then. Instead of saying that it's a utility, let's talk about the wires. The
Okay.
infrastructure was created by these cable companies on the backs of taxpayers. Most of the infrastructure anywhere, pretty much, is created with subsidies. And the explicit rules that they can't do things like that, or they have to follow federal guidelines. So
That is
those
not
federal,
true.
that's how it works in most towns I've heard of. You
You're
don't
saying
when
you're
you
saying
go
that
in and you want to put infrastructure into a town, there are subsidies involved every
that's
time.
absolutely true. Absolutely
Yes.
true. What you're saying is there are subsidies, but you forget that there's also fines.
What do you mean?
There are costs.
Yeah,
You have to
cost.
pay.
Okay,
You have to pay to put down stuff. The
that's true.
subsidies just mean you pay less. That's
And
it.
we have also given these internet companies, like in most cities, I mean, you literally have two, at most two, maybe three options of actual internet providers
That's absolutely true. There's few options
because of that
in
wiring
many
setup.
locations.
So
No,
they
that
have
would be because of the regulation.
no,
Do you know how difficult it is to lay down anything below a foot below a ground, even in Perry?
no. I understand. I understand
Perry,
all that.
Florida, a small town in Perry, Florida. You have to get like a billion different regulations and pay so many people, so many things. And then again, this is interesting. An inspector has to come out and say yes to everything. This happens in California,
Yep.
Chicago, all over the place. You
Oh
have to
yeah.
pay an arm and a leg to put down anything.
That's
So what we're talking about isn't just a company coming in and just laying down something and the government paying them. We're talking about a company coming in and paying an arm and a leg and getting many people to come in and put their thumb on it and say, yeah, that looks good. It can take years. And then eventually they have to get their money back from all of that.
well, okay.
So,
If we're gonna get into this argument, so if if you want to go to the point where infrastructure is going to be anybody can lay down infrastructure. Let's just let five different cable companies lay down infrastructure. You're going to have five different cable lines running into your house. Maybe 10 different phone lines.
mhm.
What about giant, I mean just giant monumentally sized fucking power lines going through the neighborhood and shit like that so that you have your choice of different providers. It's just not possible in the real
So
world.
either you want, no, it is possible. It's absolutely possible.
So what? You're gonna have like fucking 10 providers running into your house?
If you wanted it that way, you could, but you can't. That's what we're talking about. You can't. Only the people who can afford, or sorry, only the major companies that can afford to deal with all the fines, all the inspections,
Mm-hmm.
all the resource management to get the cable out there, the digging, the zoning, the
Yeah.
permits, only the people who can handle that can actually do this. And that means
Yes.
they're big companies, and there are only a few of them.
And it also means that they're going to end up government regulated by the end of it because they're going to end up being a monopoly in their city.
I'm afraid it's just a private company.
Yeah,
As
but
long as there's two,
we still
as long as
have
there's
rules
two,
about this when it comes to telecommunications. This
there
isn't
is
something
no,
new. It's literally the same guidelines that have been in place since the 1930s.
yeah,
When
but there
telephone
is no
companies were,
monopoly.
but the telephone companies did the exact same thing. And everybody want to
AT&T,
act like,
Bell.
yeah, everybody want to act like this is something new that just came up with internet. It's not. This is why they should be regulated under the same guidelines.
So they'll end up like the telephone company.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what happened to the telephone company?
What? I've got a telephone company here. You've got a telephone company there. They're
I do
everywhere.
not. I do not. I don't have a telephone in my house.
Yes, but you have a telephone line running through your house.
Yeah, but it's not being used. That's my point. There's
You're
an
using it
entire
for your internet. You're using DSL, I'd bet.
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay. I just assumed that you were using DSL.
No,
Okay.
no.
Well, see.
Anyways, this thing is not being used. There's many more households that are leaving the telephone and going to different resources. Like, for example, satellite dishes are way cheaper than they
And
used to be.
that might happen one day with internet too, but right now satellite internet
No,
is
no, no, no,
junk.
no. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Without the regulation from the US government, we advanced in internet technology almost every year to the point where we have fiber optics, and bandwidth is apparently not even an issue.
It's
So,
not really anymore.
what happened to the advances that came from the telephone companies? It seems that they stagnated because they didn't need to do anything because they were protected by the government. And what happened eventually? Cell phones came along and better technology replaced it. Unregulated technology.
cell phones are regulated. Their FCC have to be compliant with radio waves. They follow the same rules that your local radio station does.
Yeah, and now they're being obsolete because you can call people over your internet provider.
Which is regulated also.
No, the internet provider wasn't regulated until 2015.
Okay, so you want less regulation. Now, what a lot of people are scared about with the ending of net neutrality is that it's going to get to the point where your cable company is going to sell internet like it was television.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's going to be like you get your Google and you get your social media package where you can get Facebook and Snapchat and all that, and you can get that for $9.99 a month, or your news service for another $99.99 a month, and then you want gaming that's going to cost $100 a month just so you can game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whole idea is that one day they might break down these prices.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been movement towards that. I mean, you see cable companies wanting to basically shut off Netflix because they want to have people buy their cable service instead of Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And that's only going to increase, and that might actually happen because of all these cord cutting.
Well, first of all, one would suggest that it would not happen because it didn't happen when they could have done it.
Happened to Vonage in 2004. An internet provider, I want to say it was...
You're talking about people. You said people, not companies. So when did it ever affect the person directly?
Well, here. Let me talk about this. The Madison, it says it right here. Madison River Communications Company was fined $15,000 by the FCC in 2004 for restricting their customers' access to Vonage, which was rivaling their own service at the time. And AT&T was caught limiting access to FaceTime, so only those users paid for AT&T's new shared data plans could access the application. I mean, we've seen attempts at this in the past. And they've all been failed attempts, but they have tried it. So what's going to stop them now? Anything?
What is the objective of these attempts, and why weren't they wide-scale usage?
Well, they got fined immediately in the 2004 case. Verizon, and that's what caused AT&T ended up taking the FCC to court, and that's what started everything that we're in now.
Those were test cases to determine what can be done and what can't be done. Okay, so they did them on small scales, essentially, and they did it to private companies.
Now,
other private companies. Do you know why? Because the other private companies aren't generally quickly represented by the U.S. government. When a person's in trouble, the U.S. government occasionally finds a sob story and then does something about it. And then usually the better the media coverage, the easier it is for them to get involved and do something about it. In this particular case, it was two companies interacting with each other. It's interesting because a lot of people find the idea of these companies benefiting from net neutrality, the FCC's net neutrality being sort of gone, distasteful. They find the idea of these companies benefiting distasteful. Yet they are worried about when these companies were working against each other. And the one thing that they wanted is what they ultimately got. There's companies that just ended up buying those companies. So back in the day, these companies were separate, and now Netflix, I think, is owned by, it might be not Netflix, but people are basically being bought. These streaming services are being bought or partnered with in order for them to use this service. And this was happening while net neutrality was happening. So they just found another way around it. So what they wanted at that time was to create partnerships, lucrative partnerships. And the government came in and said, well, this could go a little too far. It could affect more people, maybe possibly in the future could have. Let's get in there and just regulate the shit out of it.
It isn't regulating the shit out of it. I mean, yes, there was a bit overhanded with the whole, common carrier thing in 2015, but that wasn't... Personally, I'm okay with the FTC taking over this job, but I don't think the FTC is actually going to do anything more than to make sure companies aren't making lucrative deals that are too lucrative and, stifling innovation at that point. And I don't think they're gonna do shit if let's say, Comcast, since they're owned by or since they own MSNBC, they might be like, fuck it, let's end Breitbart. Let's just take them off all our Comcast service. And then Breitbart will no longer be available on Comcast because they don't want, right-winging news on their sites, on their internet.
Well, and that would be their, I suppose, right to do that if they can justify whatever contract
but
they
how
signed.
is it their right if they're digging through people's yards, putting lines in, putting poles up through people's yards without using eminent domain to do this, I might add?
Because the U.S. government said it was appropriate.
Yes, but they should be controlled by the U.S. government at that point.
Your state zoning commission gave them permission, not ownership, permission. They paid for everything else. They paid to put the lines down. They paid all of it. They also had to pay extra to pay the government to get their slice of it. So the government was actually bought off, if you want to get into the technical term. When those fines were paid, the government shut its mouth. So the service is done. What they wanted from you is basically for the government to tell you that you can't do anything about it. Does that make sense?
No, I get what you're saying, but that's what should happen, though. The government should be able to tell them that since we're letting you do all this, we're letting you go through people's yards to create this infrastructure.
You said let.
Yes, they are allowing it.
No, they bought permission.
Okay. I mean,
they paid the fines, they paid all the costs, they got all the inspectors, all the regulations, all the above the board with lawyers and everything. They set down this cable and they paid for it themselves.
So shouldn't these cable lines be regulated if they're owned by the government then?
No, the companies paid for the cable.
Okay, so who owns the cable? The company or the government?
The companies.
The companies own the cable. Okay.
Yes.
Now, the companies had to go through people's yards to do that.
That's correct. And they paid the governments in those areas to be allowed to do it.
Yes. They should not have full 100% unregulated control of it at that point.
Why? It's their property.
Yes, well, it's on someone else's property.
And the person who protects your property said that it was okay.
Yeah, well, at the same time, again, this has been upheld in other situations. What makes internet different than a phone service?
Well, first of all,
from a legal standpoint,
the phone service is more useless than the internet. So I guess that would be one thing.
Nowadays, yes, but I'm saying, what's the difference between 1930s phone service and 2018 internet?
I suppose that would be the interest of the Bell company to maintain a monopoly, despite the fact that there were competitors.
I understand, but they were regulated. They were controlled. Why can't the same rules apply to internet companies?
Do you think that they weren't for that regulation? That they didn't lobby for that regulation on themselves?
I assume that they did not.
They did. They did because they can afford the regulation that they know that the competition can't.
So what's the difference? Let's take this further then, since we have more competition in the electricity market. Electricity market has to lay down the wires just like anybody else does. Why is it that we regulate them and not ISPs?
Well, that is actually a legitimate case. So what happens if the electricity goes out in a city?
I don't know, chaos.
That's why it's regulated.
Yeah, no.
That's why it's regulated.
I get that. And the internet's getting to the point where it's required in our daily lives.
It's not required.
Give it another 5 years. 10 years, I'll tell you right now, 10 years ago, you could go months without the internet without even thinking about it. No problem.
Maybe true. Maybe true.
You can't do that nowadays.
The separation is just like the transportation industry.
Heck, the ticket I got the other day, I can't even pay. I have to pay it online.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but here's the thing. Vitality for a person, okay, and then vitality for a nation. That is what is regulated. Utilities that are vitality for a nation are regulated, not for a person.
And the other bad thing about net neutrality being gone is that the control isn't open like it was before. Now the control is given to these ISPs who can decide willy-nilly whether they want to end a website or not. Like if I start up a small business and it directly competes with them, then I'm screwed.
Do you know why they have control now?
Go ahead. Explain.
Because they own it. It's their property. They built the infrastructure to do it.
Yeah, but there was a ton of subsidies involved in that, so the costs were lower because of that.
And there was a ton of fines and taxes.
Yes.
Which one do you think was offset? Do you think they received more money, or did they have to pay out more money?
No,
for
I
the
think they had to pay
opportunity?
out more money. I would say probably
Okay.
50% what they would have had to pay without government.
Keep in mind, a number of these companies have a massive amounts of debt. Now, it's good debt, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that it's debt still. So these companies still have to pay off their
So
bills
you
as
want
well.
to allow your internet provider to have the ability to shut off any website they want. Like, let's say they just want you to go to their one website, their access website, and that's it. You can, explore your local your yearly encyclopedia, and that's all that they want you to do.
No. What I want my internet provider to do is to provide me the internet and nothing else.
Yes.
I will find an internet provider that does that,
Now-
and I'll stick with them. I'll give them my money.
Well, let's
Yeah.
say both your internet providers one day decide to end, because you have two in your town.
I won't pay for anything. I'll just quit.
You'll just quit if they end a website you dislike or you like.
Yeah, if they try to censor my access to the internet, I will stop
All
using
right.
the internet.
What about the next week when you need to get a job application?
I will go to the job application site and I'll hand it to them.
Well, I can tell you right now, my job, you couldn't do that at.
That may be true, but I imagine that your job is required to have computers there for low-income people to come and access them.
No, we
Well, then they would be
online.
breaking a what do you call that? Is it HIPAA?
There-
OSHA
I
regulation.
should say there's a couple little other ways you can get a job with us.
Okay, well then,
Yeah.
if there was absolutely no other way, unless it was only.
I'll
with
tell you
internet
this:
access,
you'll actually get less pay if you apply for the job the other ways.
that's a possibility, but
Yeah.
either way, the access has to be there, and I would rather.
Because the other ways is through temp agencies. We only put up online, so.
Okay. Well, I'd rather find an internet provider, and believe me, there would always be one that would be doing something the other ones weren't, because that is where the money's
That might be true, and that part makes me feel comfortable because you're right. But and with options increasing with satellite internet and all that stuff, our choices are going to increase. But right now, satellite internet is terrible. It's next to impossible to use. I mean,
This is the interesting thought. That's a very good point. Why is it terrible?
because it's still young. Well, mainly, specifically, I mean, if you want me to get into the technicals of why it's terrible, because of ping times.
There's no money in making it better. You basically cannot charge somebody for it being faster. Why even bother?
What do you mean?
Let's just say, for example, you have the opportunity to give people the fastest internet possible, right? Why? And once you do that, you don't charge them any more than the slower internet you once had.
Yes.
So you just open the floodgates and all the bandwidth, infinite data, all of it, right? And you're just receiving money to make maintenance on it, essentially.
Yeah.
That is not a business model that will last.
Google
Cannot be
has
competitive.
actually done this business model.
Really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
in Kansas City. Hate to go off script here. But
No, it's fine.
Yeah, and a few other places. They are.
And what is the business model? Just paying
Hold on.
exactly what the cost
It's really crazy what their Google Fiber plans are.
is?
It's like insane.
Insanely good or bad?
It's good. I
Okay,
don't know
so
what they
what's
are
the
nowadays. Hold on a second. Like, well, you can't get it here, first off. That's the biggest issue.
Okay.
Because, yeah, it's not here yet. If it ever will be. I mean, shit. Okay. So, looks like their current service is $60 a month or $550 annually. And I don't know if this is still true. Do they offer the lower plan? I don't know if they still offer this, but when they first started out, they offered a lifetime plan where you paid, I think it was $400, and you got 40 megabit per second internet for the rest of your life.
Are we talking about in Kansas City?
Yeah.
Internet plans, fiber 100.
Hold on, let me look. I'm pretty sure it was Kansas
City.
City.
Google Fiber, Kansas City. Fiber 100 is $50 a month. That is 100 megabytes or Mbps.
Hold on. Yeah, I don't know if they offer the lifetime plan anymore. That was something that kind of went away. I just remember that being a thing. Where they
I know CenturyLink offers a lifetime plan now.
Oh, do they? How much is that?
It is, you will always have to pay $45 for life.
Nah, the way Google did it was like a $400 or $500 fee that you paid once, and then they gave you, I think it was 40 megabits per second. It's either 40 or 6. This was a while ago, so it might have been 6. But 6 megabits.
They said 40 was a very poor amount.
Oh, it is. But it was also $500 a month. It was $500 one-time fee. So basically, it was for low-income people. People who didn't really have any other options.
So you give them the scraps. I get it.
Yeah, Fiber 100. That's a good price too. Jesus Christ, I would love that.
I'm sure it's a good price, but that just proves my point. Like, these kind of things are going to come out and they're going to compete. As long as you don't have companies being friends, they'll be fine.
That's true. But with this Fiber 1000, just to give you an idea here, you're like Mediacom or Comcast right now, they can offer that in almost every single city they are in, but they do not.
Yeah, there's a reason for that.
What do you think the reason is?
They wouldn't be able to charge you any more money for it.
Well, they could charge, $100 a month for it or something.
Yeah, but then they'd have to charge it for everyone. So there would be, you'd charge everyone $100 a month.
No,
right?
They have tiers still.
Okay, I don't understand what you're saying. So, what do you, can you explain that again, please?
All right, so like you can pay, like I don't know what their rates are right now by any means. I don't have Mediacom or I don't even have cable internet, but like $50 a month will get you like 40 megabits per second. $70 a month will get you like 100 megabits per second. So why not add $100 a month plan that will give you 1,000 megabits per second or a gigabit per second? I mean, why is that not a thing? Why are they not giving them this opportunity?
You realize that they inhibited them from doing that, right?
Who?
The FCC?
I'll tell you right now. I could go up to my phone company and ask them if I can have a gigabit per second internet connection, and they'd give it to me.
You're saying that they would charge you no extra money?
No, they would charge me extra. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that the government... So what is net neutrality?
Net neutrality is saying that all data is treated equal. Yes. But
so
how
there would
you
be
get...
no difference in streaming service.
That's never been a thing. That has never been part of net neutrality.
Okay, so then what is a part of net neutrality? What are you worried about then?
About websites being blocked on a whim.
That's it?
Yes.
Okay, so you're talking about the throttling aspect.
Yes.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
That's what net neutrality is. Now, do you want your internet provider to start throttling websites? That's the question.
I'm talking about the package deals that the net neutrality essentially was preventing from happening. People partnering up and providing better service for things that are within their, like, basically a good example is T-Mobile and I think Netflix have this thing where if you're streaming Netflix on their T-Mobile service, it doesn't cost you your data. right? If you don't have unlimited data, it doesn't cost you data. That kind of partnering, that kind of pairing, that's what I'm talking about. So basically,
but why not just provide the unlimited data to all your customers? Why are we partnering up businesses and getting more money off of them so that they can have?
You just explained it. You just said it. Why are we getting more money for getting more money?
You're right. Sorry, stupid question there. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
let me rephrase what I was saying. Why should we allow that?
What you don't have a choice. If you want to be a person who is,
I had a choice 2 years ago. I might add, 2 years ago it was completely fair. It was saying there was no buddying. You know, that's the very definition of monopoly.
It's not fair.
It's price. Right. It's price setting.
It's not fair.
It's literally another version of price setting.
What do you mean?
I mean, it's literally two companies getting together who would, in an ordinary circumstance, be competitors, because T-Mobile offers a cable plan, yet Netflix offers a streaming plan. They are straight up competitors, and they're getting together.
Competitors. It's incorrect. It's not. They're not. Netflix does not work in T-Mobile's arena. It just works on it.
T-Mobile provides television service.
Yes, and Netflix is a television service. It provides a television service. Netflix is a television service. They're not in the same competitive field.
They compete. People cut cable to go to Netflix. T-Mobile offers cable. People are leaving T-Mobile's service to go to Netflix. So T-Mobile and Netflix are getting together and saying, hey, how do we make sure we both can make money off this?
Yes, because they're not competing.
Exactly. They should be competing.
Why would okay, please explain how Netflix is going to compete with T-Mobile. Okay. When are they going to start making phones, Netflix phones? Is that what you're suggesting?
Netflix, no. Phones is not service? T-Mobile's only business.
Okay, so T-Mobile has a streaming service.
Yeah, actually they do.
Okay, and they show movies and stuff, right?
I have no idea, but I know that they have a streaming service.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mean a Netflix style streaming service?
Man, you're getting into like major technicalities here.
No, it's a very specific technicality, because what you've said is that they're competing. If you can't prove they're competing, then the technicality is yours.
Look, they are competing because T-Mobile offers a television service. All right? So does Netflix. Those two services are competing against each other.
Okay. T-Mobile offers an opportunity to watch TV on your phone. It doesn't offer movies or shows, right?
No, I'm talking cable. Like, they offer cable. You know, like Mediacom here does.
Yeah,
Mediacom offers cable. Okay?
You have an opportunity to watch television on your phone.
People leave cable to go to streaming services. Meaning streaming services are competing with cable.
That has nothing to do with Netflix.
Man, it is literally two businesses getting together and being like, hey, let's buddy up and make sure we both make money. And then T-Mobile is basically saying, hey, we won't throttle you if you pay us a little bit of money because we're losing so many customers on this side of the business because of you.
No. What all they have to do is say, we will not charge people for your service, for using you on our app, which will encourage people to use you on a T-Mobile device. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get what you're trying to get at here, but it shouldn't be that way to begin with. First off, the whole idea of data caps is bullshit, and that's a different subject for a different day. But if they they should not be charging anybody any data caps, and if they do charge data caps, they shouldn't be taking data caps away from certain websites because they're paying them a little bit of extra. That isn't how it works. If your whole point for data caps is because it's flooding your market, don't fucking take away the data caps to your biggest bandwidth hog. It doesn't even make sense. Your whole argument fails there.
In what regard?
It's literally underhanded tactics by businesses.
Again,
what's the point of a data cap?
The point of the data cap is to get more money.
No, the point of the data cap, as said by multiple companies, is that they do not have the bandwidth to support modern day usage.
Mm-hmm.
They don't say it's to get more money.
Okay, so?
All right. So now,
what's your point?
They're using it as an excuse to get more money. And it's bullshit. It's a lie.
Okay, I'm confused. I just said it was to get more money. You said no, it
No,
was
no,
to
no,
get
no,
more
no.
money.
Okay, it is to get more money. I agree with you there. Okay.
Okay, so what's the issue?
The issue is they shouldn't be getting more money for no reason.
The reason is they own it.
Man, I gotta disagree with you on that. Because
Okay,
the infrastructure.
no, hold
You
on.
think
You're right. You're right.
T-Mobile? You
Who
think
owns
T-Mobile?
T-Mobile? What company owns
I have
T-Mobile?
no
Could you
idea.
help me with that?
No.
Oh, it's T-Mobile. T-Mobile owns T-Mobile.
Okay,
So
T-Mobile.
you're saying who else can own T-Mobile? What are you talking about?
What? No, no, no one else owns T-Mobile. What?
No, I'm just saying. Okay, there may be a company out there that owns through independent or shell corporations, all these independent companies. But what we're talking about is the property of the company T-Mobile. So even if they're under the Comcast, for example, umbrella, right?
Mm-hmm.
T-Mobile entities would be T-Mobile's under the Comcast umbrella. Okay.
Yes.
Otherwise, they'd all be T-Mobile would be erased and would be called Comcast something or other. But anyways, Comcast T-Mobile, let's just assume that it is owned by another entity.
Right.
It's still all the stuff T-Mobile made to get to the part where it's sold to Comcast is the property of T-Mobile.
But these are using public utilities. They're using radio waves. They are using, which has been held up multiple times. Radio waves are owned by the FCC, and then people rent them out.
Radio waves are owned by the FCC.
They are. All radio waves in America are owned by the FCC.
Do you mind if I check that out?
Yeah.
I know they're controlled. I don't think they're owned.
You have to pay a leasing fee to use radio waves.
Yeah, and a licensing as well. There's some sort of license thing.
Wow, I just pulled up shit. It doesn't even make sense to me. But yes, words are a bad way to put it. We'll just say they're licensed out. I don't mind saying that. So
okay, so
yeah.
they're licensed. They're basically. I agree that they're controlled by the FCC.
Yes, they are controlled by the FCC. Now, if they're controlled by the FCC and you're using these radio waves to send data and you're saying that these radio waves are going to be clogged up for some bullshit reason and this is why we need to do a price increase, the FCC has every right to say no. And yet we stifle that power.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that this company can make more money based on bullshit science.
On bullshit science?
Yes.
What do you mean bullshit science?
Bandwidth allocations. I mean, they're radio waves. You're not clogging up radio waves in this situation.
It's basically along the idea that turning on your phone during a plane flight would kill the plane or something.
Well, there's a bit more truth to that one.
Oh, really? Because they've actually stopped doing that in some places.
Yeah, but there's still a little bit. Well, that's because the technology's changed. I don't know enough about that to really speak on it.
Okay. Well, so basically you're saying that it's bullshit that these people producing the towers that makes these frequencies has control of them?
Look, if they want to make more money, say it and let the FCC decide at that point if it's okay or not.
Well, at the time they couldn't say it because, the whole net neutrality being enforced in the shadows.
Ooh, shadows.
Yeah, because before 2015, the idea of net neutrality was expected and enforced in a open internet thing that was open internet order 2010, I think.
Yeah.
Where it basically was guidelines that they wanted people to follow, and they basically hinted that the government would come at you pretty hard if you didn't do it. So people lied. Companies lied about bullshit caps because also,
look,
they own the property. So,
you know what? I can agree with you on that. That was something that was happened, and I will
add the caveat, assuming that you are correct. Okay, because I don't know anything else about this, but assuming that the caps are bullshit, as you term them, then that's why they did it, because they want more money.
Yes.
And they couldn't do it in the open.
Look, no matter what, I'm going to agree with you on this because I will say the one thing that the FCC is doing now that I like is that they are requiring these companies to be more transparent as to why they charge these fees, and I think that's extremely important.
Why couldn't they do that under net neutrality?
Because what you're saying, they were scared. They didn't want to get in trouble.
Why didn't the FCC enforce transparency?
That's a good question. I do not have an answer to that one.
I can tell you why. Because it wasn't their concern.
Their concern was just the public image, you think?
No, the concern was the control of the businesses.
All right, fair enough.
They could have easily enforced that anything you're doing, you have to explain, or you have to be willing to openly explain it, or that they can investigate it at any time. Any of these policies, if they were going to go ahead and limit the actions that they were going to be taking, and they could say, we want to make sure that all these bandwidths are, being treated equally. So we need to know what's in them. We need to make sure all this data, even if it's a sizable portion of data, and you say that it's just as equal as this one, we want to make sure what it is. They could have put some sort of provision in that to find out the transparency. But then why all of a sudden is the evil guys, the guys who are coming in and trying to get rid of the FCC's net neutrality, if they're so bad, why do they want more transparency?
Well, I'm not saying that they're bad.
No,
I'm saying that there was a lot of under-table stuff going on here, but
if you think it's the end of the world, that all these companies are going to get rich off of this, why would a government that is supposed to be for the people do it?
Well, the more transparency thing is the one thing that they did right.
It's inconsistent. That's the one thing that's inconsistent with the idea. Now, if you actually ask economists and you look at the history, you have any regulated industry. Railroads, right? That was regulated to ship because in the early days of railroads, tycoons like I want to say Carnegie was a railroad guy, but I might be wrong.
No, anyways, he wasn't. But yeah,
they would make weird tracks. They would have engines that worked on these specific tracks in order to get like monopolies on commissions. The same thing happened with record players. It's something that's played out for a long time, but that's when the government would come in and just start saying, no, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. And what happens? Record players are gone.
Railroads is like the biggest industry around right now. What are you talking about?
You're saying that railroads are bigger than they were.
Oh, much bigger than they were now.
Really?
Yeah.
Because they ripped up all the railroads in the Midwest.
Those are those private lines. There's no reason for those to exist nowadays. Where railroads making money is freight transfer.
Hold on a second. You said nowadays. Yeah. Nowadays. What do you mean? What did they do back then? What were the private lines for?
What for people to travel across the as far as they could. In a short amount of
traveling.
Time. Yeah.
Like traveling.
Now we have cars. They're a lot quicker and a lot more efficient when it comes to that.
Yeah. And
at least back then they were. Nowadays it's kind of moving the other way.
Part of that reason is because the government regulated the crap out of the industry. There was no innovation. There was no alteration. And then people went to a new way.
Yeah,
because it was
cheaper. Freight line railroads are one of the biggest industries in the world right now. Anybody who works for the railroad makes a lot of money.
We're talking about railroads in totality. So the entire industry of railroading
Guarantee you the industry of railroading makes more money now than it did 100 years ago.
No.
Guarantee you.
In what areas?
In freight.
Railroads have always been involved in freight since the beginning of railroads.
Yes, but I'm talking about the freight industry nowadays is insane. Logistics companies are making billions.
But railroads were a part of another industry, was it not?
Yes, it was, and it's not part of that industry in America nowadays.
But it's a part of that industry in other places.
Yes.
But why is that?
Well, the other places give subsidies.
The other places didn't have monopoly regulations.
All right. Give a final thought on this. We got to change subjects. I said a half an hour at most for this one subject, and we're like an hour into it. Go ahead.
Okay. Anytime the government comes in and tries to protect something, it fucks it up. It's like the retarded child with a very pretty bird. It'll just strangle the shit out of it. It doesn't know what it's doing, and then you elect new people, and they don't know what they're doing. And let's just say there is somebody who's elected and knows what he's doing. He's going to get fired in 4 years or 8 years. and it's something that is too important to leave to people who are basically bureaucrats.
No, no. Look, I get where you're coming from 100% on all this, but I want to say that it's more important that we keep this freedom of speech across the internet where we give the chance for innovators to actually innovate, not just find more ways to take money from people for no reason other than to line their wallets. There should be, I think the internet could be better if we allowed it to be more open, and doing the net neutrality gives ISPs the power to close it off, and that's not good.